What is going on, everyone? This is Parker, one of the co-founders of Scholars, with our weekly LinkedIn Live that we started a couple weeks ago in 2022. And for any first-time viewers, the goal of these LinkedIn Lives is to talk about all things candidate experience and candidate engagement for early career candidates, interns, new grads, interns we've converted, or maybe even students who are just starting their entry-level job, and we're working with them in ensuring that their training is going well. Each week, we cover topics that we hear from people DMing me, asking me questions about early career candidate experience, our Slack community, which you can see down below as well, where leaders are having kind of open conversations about what's working and what's not as it relates to program management and candidate communication strategies from the first time a candidate engages with companies' brands. With that, I'm super excited for this week's episode because we're going to be talking about when and why candidates renege. With that, I'd like to start just by first, when are candidates reneging? Obviously, it can differ based on your company. I would like to bring it down to a level of differing based on the type of candidate. Interns versus interns who have converted and are full-time or going to be full-time employees. There's really 2 months that we see interns truly reneging. I know we covered this on the first LinkedIn Live a little bit, but January is a very hot month for early career candidate renegs within your internship program. Candidates went through an entire fall recruiting season and honestly were probably exhausted at the end of it and had an offer or two and took one because they had put in all this time and effort to getting their internship that they know that they need. They're getting pressure from seeing the other friends getting internships and making sure that all that time that they spent going to info sessions, events, virtual events, reaching out to recruiters was time well spent. So they accept an offer, they go home. Well, what happens when they go home for winter break? Obviously, they have time to take a step back and actually think about the decisions that they're making and about their future. For most of them, it's their first time maybe getting an internship offer. For others, obviously not, but they're talking to their friends from back home. They're comparing their internship opportunities as well as they're talking to their family, and their family is asking them more about the role. And as they start to have those conversations, obviously, things happen and people start to think about, was this truly the best opportunity for me? They come back before a spring semester. They know that spring recruiting is around the corner and is when January is the time where they need to let companies know if they're going to rescind on that offer that they accepted. So watch out January for interns reneging. And then as well for interns is that April timeframe. So maybe they had a successful fall recruiting season. They didn't have any questions going home and they're in their spring semester. Well, we all know that recruiters are still hosting events. Maybe they're shopping around. Maybe they're just getting conversations with other recruiters as well and talking to them and hearing them out, letting them know what offer they've accepted and hearing what other companies have to offer. This is why April is another hot time where candidates are going to be reneging because that spring recruiting is done. Those companies are sending out offers and maybe something piques their interest. We just don't know. So I'll flip to interns that have converted or full-time employees. The main one that we see, I would say, is that kind of later October timeframe. A student has completed an internship, accepted a return offer, but now they're back. It's their senior year. There's still a fall recruiting season going on, and they might be talking to recruiters, letting them know, hey, I have accepted the job with this company that I just interned with. At the end of the day, those conversations aren't going to stop. So late October, a time where we should be looking at more of those kind of new grad, intern, full-time conversion renegs really happening and help us plan our strategy for kind of how we're going to ultimately prevent that. Obviously, to kind of close out when renegs happen, I encourage teams to obviously keep track of your own trends for when you see renegs happen and break it down by specific groups of roles, types of individuals, interns, new grad hires, and interns that have converted to full-time employees from the get-go so that you have an understanding personally for when these renegs are really happening for your company, and you can be proactive in having a strategy in place to understand what is upcoming and when we need to be prepared for those conversations to occur. With that, that's when candidates renege. Now, let's talk about why candidates renege. There's a plethora of reasons why candidates might renege on an offer that they've accepted. I'm going to cover 5 of them briefly, short, sweet, and easy. We've got an awesome blog on Scholars Blog about going more in depth in terms of 5 reasons why candidates are reneging, kind of causing this phenomenon that we've coined the great reneging. The first one is the lack of consistent communication. A lot of teams rely on hiring managers or other employees to keep the candidates that they've recruited engaged. Why is this wrong? Well, because those managers or other employees have their own roles and they can forget they've got a day-to-day job. You should base the number of touch points for your communication based on the duration of that period between offer acceptance and start date. Listen to your candidates as well. It's really interesting to understand the differences within cohorts for how they want to be communicated with. And I think if we take a step back and ask candidates how often they want to be communicated with during this period, it can give us a good idea from a candidate's perspective of how we can make sure that we're doing our part in keeping them engaged, not bombarding them with information that they don't want, but also making sure that consistent feedback. A good tip: provide them with a survey at the beginning, right after they've accepted their offer. Give them once a month, bi-weekly, every week. 3 options, super easy for you to be able to understand within that cohort of candidates you've hired how often that they want to be communicated with, so that you can take that back and strategize and set that communication to be streamlined moving forward. You also need to determine how that communication is going out. A lot of teams obviously use reminders or tasks for manual email communication. That can be challenging, as well as it's obviously not scalable. So how can we streamline that communication to our candidates in those notifications so that they're staying engaged without us having to one-to-one manually email our tens or hundreds or even thousands of interns that have accepted an offer? A super interesting quote that we got from an intern that I want to make sure that I read properly. So if you see me looking down, that's why. This intern said, "From an intern's perspective, this is extremely valid. I think the key to maintaining recruits past the holiday lull is keeping interns feel confident in their secured position as soon as possible. When an intern feels confident that they will become an important piece to the company and fully understands their role, it's harder for opinions to be swayed by peers and family." So, I mean, just listening to that quote right there, it's super interesting to think about how we empower candidates to feel like they are the ones setting forth their communication expectations, and then we're prepared on our end to truly scale that. The second reason why we see candidates reneging, obviously low quality of mentorship programs. So lots of teams have mentorship programs, but what are teams doing to actually scale their mentorship programs? Ensure that those mentorship programs as well are as up to date as possible from the standpoint of communication, and that mentors feel as confident as possible that they are going to provide an experience to our mentees that is truly transformative. We're going to be diving way deeper into how to prepare mentors to maximize that relationship in the following event in the next month. TBD, stay tuned, as well as more LinkedIn Lives coming forth as well. A third reason is a lack of community within the cohort. So lots of teams create group chats or pages or group meets where we throw all of these candidates in there and just kind of expect them to just start talking to one another and finding common interests and hobbies. In reality, that's not how it works. So think about how you can manage a community or set a strategy for management of a community of interns that's going to breed that sense of community, help to start form those relationships with their peers. Some tips: use surveys or polls initially when you get that community started to start to understand where interests and activities and hobbies lie, because that can be things that you can prompt candidates to reach out to one another, form those relationships, have those coffee chats, and start to build that sense of community within that cohort, so that it's not just a page where no one's talking and we're like, well, why is no one messaging? Fourth, the time between offer and acceptance deadline was too fast. I know a lot of teams now, we might be sending out offers on a rolling basis through the fall, and then typically we want them in kind of in that November timeframe before winter break occurs for interns. Interns, I'll say that this really doesn't apply as much from what we see. Maybe it does in the spring semester where we might be a little more pushed to ensure that we're hitting all of our numbers and our required recs that we're trying to fill. But mainly for new grads, we need to be giving them some time to think about it. Obviously, it's a big life decision for them, and everyone knows that. But even as something as simple as asking the candidate, hey, when do you think that you'll have an answer? Even though we know that we have a deadline that we need, gives them the opportunity to tell you what they're expecting and allow those expectations from a timeline perspective to be set, as well as even maybe bring the candidate to make them feel a bit more empowered in that decision timeline as well. I guess last thing while we see candidates renege is just pressure and exhaustion more than anything. I mentioned it a little bit earlier on the stream, but when you put in all this time and effort to anything, obviously you want to see the fruits of your labor at the end of the day, and you want to bear those fruits. For a candidate, if they go through a fall recruiting cycle or a spring recruiting cycle and they don't feel as confident as possible in the role that they've just accepted, maybe they don't necessarily have as much of the skills as possible. Maybe it's just not the location or the particular role that they're looking for. They might have taken it up as a backup plan, something that you can do as a recruiting team to combat this, or to at least have an understanding of candidates that are in fact accepting roles as a backup plan, is asking them in the interview process, what is their dream position? What are they looking for? And then taking a step back to look at the role that they've applied to and see how those things match up. It's really interesting to see the picture from the data that you can get in terms of if a candidate is truly accepting your job because they want to, or just because they put in all this time and effort and they know they need something. Full circle, that's when and why early career candidates renege. I know the when is a variable, and I wanted to make sure that I addressed that. The why is ever changing, and it's truly about understanding what our own internal recruiting kind of data and trends are telling us from a perspective, using those feedback surveys to truly start to understand that as well. And I want to close the LinkedIn with something super exciting. So Scholars, we actually just launched our brand new website, and we put together 4 amazing templates to help teams conceptualize what a candidate journey and a candidate communication strategy for 4 separate use cases that's going to maximize engagement could look like from data that we're hearing and insights that we've received from some of our partners. Intern to full-time conversion, early career retention, and then post-offer acceptance for interns as well as new grads. I highly encourage teams to check those templates out. I'm going to drop the links in the comments here as well. If you're having conversations about what is the strategy and how are we ensuring that it's scaled and candidates are kind of the center focus in their experience is what matters at the end of the day, I definitely recommend people checking out those templates, clicking the links in the comments as well. And it's just been an amazing show. I hope that this was helpful for teams. We've covered a lot about when as well as why early career candidates, both interns and new grads, are reneging. At the bottom, I always say, follow our Scholars LinkedIn page. We post a lot just about data and insights around early career candidate experience and engagement. Check out our Slack community. It's super exciting, just getting underway, and early career leaders having conversations in an open forum about early career candidate experience, engagement, keep warm, renegs, retention, you name it, it's in there. I highly encourage people to check that out. And I will see you all next Tuesday on our next LinkedIn Live series. Thanks again, and all the best.